Hey guys, this is your lesson on forgetting and biology bases from memory. We're going to start with a couple of slides that aren't actually in your notes, but it's just an opener to memory. So William James, we've talked about him a couple of times this year. William James on memory has a quote: "If we remembered everything, we should on most occasions be as ill off as if we remembered nothing." If we remembered everything, we should, on most occasions, be as ill off as if we remembered nothing. William James, 1890. So there was a woman who can't forget. Her name is Jill Price. She remembers every day of her life since age 14 with detailed clarity, including both the joys and the hurts. Jill possesses what's called a very detailed episodic memory, long-term memory. This is one of Jill's quotes: "Whenever I see a date flash on the television, or anywhere for that matter, I automatically go back to that day and remember where I was, what I was doing, what day it fell on, and on and on and on and on. It's nonstop, uncontrollable, and totally exhausting." So moving into your notes section, who was H.M.? Henry Molaison, or H.M., had much of his hippocampus removed in order to stop persistent seizures. This resulted in severe disconnection of the remaining hippocampus from the rest of the brain. For the rest of his life, he was unable to form new conscious memories. For about half a minute, he could keep something in mind, enough to carry on a conversation. But when he was distracted, he would lose what was just said or what had just occurred. How is H.M.'s brain still being studied? Well, although studied throughout his life, Jacopo Annese and other scientists at the University of California, San Diego's Brain Observatory are preserving Henry Molaison's brain for the benefit of future study. Two types of forgetting: anterograde amnesia and retrograde amnesia. So an inability to form new memories due to injury or illness. Anterograde amnesia, an inability to form new memories. Anterograde has an N in it, and new has an N in it. That's an easy way to remember it. As with HM, he could recall his past but not make new memories. Whereas retrograde amnesia is an inability to retrieve information from one's past due to illness or injury. So both of them happen because of injury or illness. One of them just means you can't make new memories, and one of them means you can't retrieve old memories. So when do we forget? Well, forgetting can occur at any memory stage: encoding, storage, or retrieval. When we process information, we filter, alter, or lose much of it. Let that sink in for a second. When we process information, we filter, alter, or lose much of it. So we have, starting up at the top on this diagram, we have sensory memory. Senses momentarily register amazing detail. Going into your working and short-term memory, a few items are both noticed and encoded. Going into long-term storage, some items are altered or lost. And then going into retrieval from long-term, some things get retrieved and some don't. So why do we forget? Well, 3 reasons: encoding failure, storage decay, or retrieval failure. Encoding failure is when much of what we sense we never notice, and what we fail to encode we will not remember. So you have an external event, you've got lots of sensory information coming in, attention, working short-term memory happening. Either encoding happens and it goes to long-term memory storage, or encoding doesn't happen, encoding fails, which leads to forgetting. Storage decay. After learning lists of nonsense syllables such as YOX and JIH, Ebbinghaus studied how much he retained up to 30 days later. He found that memory for novel information fades quickly, then levels out. Novel information meaning newer information, not like a novel, not like a book. What is retrieval failure? So often forgetting is not memories faded, but memories unretrieved. This is so cool. So we store in long-term memory what's important to us or what we've rehearsed. but sometimes important events defy our attempts to access them. So there's two factors that influence memory retrieval errors: proactive interference and retroactive interference. The forward-acting disruptive effect of older learning on the recall of new information is proactive interference. So the old stuff you learned last month is getting in the way of the new stuff you're trying to remember now. Whereas retroactive interference is the backward-acting disruptive effect of newer learning on the recall of old information. An easier way to put that: the newer stuff you learned this week, it's making it hard to remember the stuff you learned a few months ago. So an example from class, learning about memory could be making it hard for you to remember all the different types of the branches and the different types of psychology we learned in the first unit. Whereas the stuff we learned, an example of proactive, the stuff we learned in last unit on operating classical conditioning, that could be getting in the way of the new stuff you're trying to remember now, which is proactive interference. So some more examples of each of those. Proactive: if you buy a new combination lock, your well-rehearsed old combination may interfere with your retrieval of the new one. How many of you have been in that boat? Those of you who have locks, maybe. Retroactive interference: if someone sings new lyrics to the tune of an old song, you may have trouble remembering the original words. And some more examples. Proactive: you changed your email password last week, but you still keep typing in the old password. I do that all the time. Retroactive: your teacher gives a cumulative exam covering all 10 chapters from the first semester, but you can only recall the more recent material, not the chapters from the beginning of school. That's obviously not a Montessori class, maybe, because we would be reviewing and relooping all along, as you know, which supports all the different types of memory and putting it into your long-term memory. So what does research show? Information presented in the hour before sleep suffers less retroactive interference because the opportunity for interfering events is minimized. Super cool. So information presented in the hour before sleep, that information suffers less retroactive interference because the opportunity for interfering events is minimized. What is motivated forgetting? Well, memory is an unreliable, self-serving historian. Sigmund Freud suggested that people may forget unwanted memories either consciously or unconsciously. In other words, they may be motivated to forget. Forgetting may be in people's best interest sometimes. Well, that leads us to repression. So we're going back to Freud. He was a psychoanalyst, and he proposed that forgetting may be due to repression, which is the basic defense mechanism that banishes from consciousness anxiety-arousing thoughts, feelings, and memories. So really pushing aside and getting rid of anxiety thoughts, feelings, and memories. Margaret McKinnon would, however, disagree with him. She is a psychologist, interviewed 15 passengers who nearly died in a plane crash, and found that all exhibited vivid, detailed memories. With trauma comes not repression, but far more often robust memory. So, what's reconsolidation? Reconsolidation is a process in which previously stored memories, when retrieved, are potentially altered before being stored again. So our memories are like Wikipedia pages, capable of continuous revision. When we replay a memory, we often place the original with a slightly modified version, rather like what happens in the telephone game as a whispered message gets progressively altered when passed from person to person. How many times have you tried explaining something to somebody or tried rehashing an old memory, and two of you who are in the same place experience the same thing, have different accounts of it? That's what this is talking about, reconsolidation. What's the misinformation effect? So this occurs when misleading information has distorted one's memory of an event. Elizabeth Loftus demanded that when exposed to subtle misleading information, people may misremember. How did she test this misinformation effect? So 2 groups of people watched a film clip of a traffic accident and then answered questions about what they'd seen. So there's a depiction of the actual accident. Those asked about how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other gave higher speed estimates than those asked about how fast were the cars going when they hit each other. So the leading question influenced the recall. The word smashed and the word hit had different responses. So 1 week later, when they asked whether they recalled seeing any broken glass, people who heard smashed were more than 2 times as likely to report seeing glass fragments. In fact, the clip shows no actual broken glass. So how does imagination impact memory? Repeatedly imagining non-existent actions and events can create false memories. Misinformation and imagination effects occur partly because visualizing something and actually perceiving it activates similar brain areas. Imagined events also later seem more familiar, and familiar things seem more real. The more vividly we can imagine things, the more likely they are to actually become memories. How can digitally altered photographs produce imagination inflation? So when Slate magazine readers in 2012 were shown a doctored photo of US President Barack Obama and Iranian President Mahmoud, oh my gosh, I can't say his last name, so I'm not going to say it, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad shaking hands, 26% recalled the event despite it never having happened. I will look his name up and pronounce it in class. And I encourage you all to do the same. What is source amnesia? Faulty memory for how, when, or where information was learned or imagined, also called source misattribution. Source amnesia tends to affect a person's explicit memory, and along with the misinformation effect, is at the heart of many false memories. Some examples: we may recognize someone but have no idea where we've seen the person. How many times have you done that? We may tell a friend some gossip only to learn we got the news from that friend, which is funny when that happens. A friend tells you about an internet story about the woman who had 75 cats. You know you've heard the story before but can't remember where. Those are all different examples of source amnesia. What's deja vu? Yay, this is so fun. That eerie sense that, oh, I've done this before. Cues from the current situation may unconsciously trigger retrieval of an earlier experience. Source amnesia is one possible explanation for this phenomenon. Consider, do any of you have, and we'll bring this up in lesson check-in just for fun, but do any of you have any kind of stimulus, that visual or auditory or a smell or a taste or any kind of touch or like fabric type that triggers any kind of memory and that gives you deja vu? I often will smell like cut grass or different types of smells, and I can close my eyes and all of a sudden I'm like back in childhood at a certain place, or with a certain person. Pretty cool stuff. So how can we tell true memories from constructed memories? It's hard to separate false memories from real ones. False memories can be persistent and feel like real ones, and we more easily remember the gist than the actual events themselves. Why have reports of repressed and recovered memories been so hotly debated? Well, the debate between memory researchers and some well-meaning therapists focuses on whether memories of early childhood abuse are repressed and can be recovered during therapy. Professional organizations seek to find common ground between the potential for doubting true accusations of abuse and the potential for false accusations. So, can memories of child abuse be reconstructed as well? Sometimes a well-meaning therapist, the misinformation effect, and rehearsal of incorrect information can lead to false accusations of child abuse. So if you look at the diagram, innocent people are falsely accused as therapists prompt recovered memories of child sexual abuse. Victims of sexual abuse often have your symptoms. So maybe you were abused and repressed the memory. Let's see if I can help you recover the memory by digging back and visualizing your trauma. Misinformation effect and source amnesia. The adult client forms an image of a threatening person. With rehearsal, which is repeated therapy sessions, the image grows more vivid. Client might be stunned, angry, and ready to confront or sue the remembered abuser. Accused person is equally stunned and vigorously denies the long ago accusation. So be very clear that this does not say that therapists 100% lead to false accusations of child abuse. This is bringing up the debate about why there's a debate between memory researchers and some therapists, because this sometimes can happen. So 3 arguments against repression of child abuse memories. Psychologists question whether repression ever occurs. Traumatic experiences typically lead to vivid, persistent, haunting memories. When memories are recovered after long periods of amnesia, particularly when extraordinary means were used to secure the recovery of memory, there's a high probability that the memories are false. So, what do psychologists agree on? Right now, psychologists agree that number 1, sexual abuse happens. 2, injustice happens. 3, forgetting happens. 4, recovered memories are commonplace. 5, memories of things that happened before age 4 are unreliable, which is called infantile amnesia. 6, memories recovered under hypnosis are especially unreliable. And 7, whether real or false, memories, whether real or false, can be emotionally upsetting. So how reliable are young children's eyewitness descriptions? If memories can be sincere yet sincerely wrong, how can jurors decide cases in which children's memories of sexual abuse are the only evidence? Well, Stephen Ceci and Maggie Bruck's studies of children's memories have made them aware of how easily children's memories can be molded. For example, they asked 3-year-olds to show on anatomically correct dolls where a pediatrician had touched them. Of the children who had not received genital examinations, 55% pointed to either genital or anal areas. In one analysis of eyewitness data from over 20,000 participants, children regularly identified innocent suspects as guilty. The research, said Stephen Ceci, leads me to worry about the possibility of false allegations. It's not a tribute to one's scientific integrity to walk down the middle of the road if the data are more to one side. So last, how can you use your memory research to do better in your courses and on the AP exam? Memory research findings suggest the following strategies for improving memory. And we've talked about a lot of these for years and again in this course. Study repeatedly. In other words, don't cram. Make material meaningful. Applications that apply to you. So applications with psychoblurbs that, if you can, apply them to yourself, your life. Activate retrieval cues, use mnemonic devices, minimize interference, sleep more, and test yourself to be sure you can retrieve as well as recognize material. Yay, I kept it under 19 minutes. It's a record. Happy day, friends. See you soon.